This morning is not ordinary. You didn't wake up by accident, and you didn't arrive in this moment by chance. Before your feet touched the floor, heaven was already in motion on your behalf. While you were sleeping, God was arranging outcomes, shifting obstacles, and positioning favor ahead of you. That is the power of a morning when God goes before you. The morning is a gate. What you release at the start of your day determines what has permission to follow you. When God goes before you, confusion does not lead, clarity does. Fear does not lead, faith does. Delays do not lead, divine alignment does. Today, we are not just praying out of habit. We are declaring alignment. We are activating blessing. We are stepping into a day already ordered by God. And as we pray together, Reza Conmigo, we are inviting the Lord to take the lead in every conversation, every decision, every step. So lift your expectation, open your spirit. This is a morning where God goes before you. And when God goes before you, nothing behind you can stop what He has already released. God prepares the day before you step into it, which means nothing you encounter today is a surprise to Him. Before the sun rose, before alarms rang, before schedules filled your mind, God was already present in the unseen corridors of your day. He went ahead of your conversations, ahead of your decisions, ahead of your responsibilities, and ahead of your challenges. While you were resting, He was working. While you were unaware, He was arranging. The day may feel new to you, but it is already familiar to God. He has walked its hours, measured its moments, and positioned His purpose within it. This truth shifts how we approach the morning because we are not stepping into uncertainty, we are stepping into preparation. When God prepares the day, He does not merely observe what will happen, He establishes what is permitted to happen. There are things that try to gain access to your day that have already been denied entry by divine authority. Delays that were meant to frustrate you are intercepted. Confusion that was meant to cloud your judgment is cleared before it forms. Even opposition that still appears cannot function the way it intended, because preparation limits its reach. God's preparation does not always remove resistance, but it regulates its outcome. What was meant to weaken you becomes a platform for wisdom. What was meant to exhaust you becomes an opportunity for endurance. What was meant to discourage you becomes evidence of God's involvement. Preparation also means provision. God never sends you into a day empty-handed. If the day requires strength, strength has already been assigned. If the day demands patience, patience has already been deposited within you. If the day calls for courage, courage has already been stirred in your spirit. You may not feel it immediately because provision often reveals itself at the moment of demand. Just as the ground produces water when struck, the resources of God surface when the moment requires them. You are not waiting for God to show up. He is waiting for you to recognize that He is already there. God prepares encounters. There are people you will cross paths with today who are not random. Some are assigned to speak what you need to hear. Some are assigned to receive what you carry. Some are divine interruptions meant to slow you down so you don't miss what matters. Others are confirmations that what God spoke in private is now appearing in public. Preparation means timing is intentional. Conversations happen when your heart is ready. Opportunities appear when your character can sustain them. Even closed doors serve preparation, because what you are being protected from is just as important as what you are being led toward. God also prepares you. The version of you that woke up this morning is not the same version that lay down last night. Growth happens quietly. Maturity develops without announcement. Faith expands even when you are not aware of it. You may still feel weak in certain areas, but preparation does not require perfection. It requires positioning. God positions you through experiences, through seasons, through lessons that did not make sense when they occurred, but now serve as foundations. Every prayer you prayed in the past, every tear you shed in faith, every moment you chose obedience over comfort has been shaping your readiness for this day. Preparation does not eliminate responsibility. You still have to walk, choose, speak, and respond. But you do so with the confidence that you are not the first one entering the situation. God has already scoped the terrain. He knows where the traps are. He knows where the favor is hidden. He knows which turns to avoid and which paths to take. When you lean into His leading, even mistakes become recoverable. Even wrong turns can be redirected. Preparation gives room for mercy because God's foresight accounts for human limitation. When God prepares the day, peace becomes possible even before circumstances change. Peace flows from knowing that outcomes are not solely resting on your ability. You are not carrying the full weight of today on your shoulders. You are partnering with a God who sees beyond the moment. This changes how you respond to pressure. You do not rush out of fear. You do not react out of anxiety. You move with intention, trusting that what is meant for you will not miss you, and what is not meant for you cannot trap you. Preparation also means that God has already spoken into the spiritual atmosphere of your day. Words have been released that will outlast opposition. Declarations have gone forth that override negativity. Blessings have been set in motion that will locate you at the right time. Even if you encounter resistance, it does not have the final word. The final word was spoken before the day began. Heaven does not improvise, it executes what has already been decreed. This understanding reshapes morning prayer. Prayer is no longer begging God to step into your day. It is aligning yourself with what He has already prepared. You are not convincing Him to care. You are tuning your heart to His care. You are not forcing doors open. You are asking for discernment to recognize the ones already unlocked. Morning prayer becomes an act of agreement rather than desperation. It is saying, I trust that you have gone before me, so I choose to follow. God prepares the day with intention, but He also leaves room for relationship. He desires your awareness, your dependence, your trust. Preparation is not meant to make you passive but confident. It is meant to free you from fear so you can operate with faith. When you step into the day, knowing God has already been there, you walk differently, you speak differently, you decide differently. You are not chasing the day, you are stewarding it. You are not surviving it, you are partnering with what God has already established in it, knowing that every hour, every moment, every unexpected turn is still unfolding within a day that was prepared long before you arrived, shaped by divine wisdom, sustained by grace, and ordered by a God who never starts what He has not already finished, who never sends you where His presence has not already settled, who never assigns a day without embedding within it the strength, clarity, favor, and insight required to navigate it faithfully as you move forward into what has been prepared ahead of you, step by step, moment by moment, aware that nothing is wasted, nothing is overlooked, and nothing arrives without purpose already attached to it, even when you cannot yet see how it will unfold or where each path will lead, trusting that preparation does not mean predictability but assurance, not control but confidence, not ease but guidance, as you continue walking into a day already touched, already shaped, already known by God, who goes before you and remains with you as you move through every part of it, without rushing ahead of His timing or falling behind His leading, remaining attentive to the quiet instructions, the gentle nudges, the inner assurance that confirms you are not alone in this day that has been prepared, arranged, aligned, and set before you as a sacred trust to steward with faith, obedience, expectation, and awareness that the unseen work has already been done before the visible journey even began. Morning prayer activates divine alignment and favor because it positions your spirit before it positions your steps. Before the world begins to speak demands, before circumstances try to dictate pace, before emotions attempt to interpret what lies ahead, prayer centers you in God's order. Alignment is not accidental, it is intentional agreement with divine direction. When you pray in the morning, you are not starting the day late, you are starting it right. You are choosing to let heaven set the tone instead of allowing urgency, pressure, or noise to do it for you. Alignment begins internally. Morning prayer brings your thoughts, emotions, and intentions into harmony with God's will. Many struggles people face throughout the day are not because God is absent, but because alignment was never established. When the inner world is misaligned, even good opportunities feel heavy and right doors feel confusing. Prayer recalibrates your discernment. It quiets mental clutter and sharpens spiritual sensitivity so that you recognize what fits and what does not. Alignment helps you say no without guilt and yes without fear. Divine alignment also affects timing. Prayer synchronizes your movements with God's timing rather than human impatience. There are moments you are saved from simply because you were delayed, redirected, or slowed down. There are breakthroughs you walk into because you arrived at the right moment rather than the rushed one. Morning prayer tunes your awareness to divine pacing. You stop striving to force outcomes and start trusting the rhythm of God's unfolding plan. Favor flows more freely when timing is honored. Favor is not random kindness, it is strategic advantage. Favor is God causing things to work in your direction beyond your natural effort. Morning prayer activates favor because it acknowledges dependence. God responds to humility, not self-sufficiency. When you begin the day in prayer, you are declaring that success does not rest solely on your ability, intelligence, or connections. That posture opens doors effort alone cannot open. Favor finds those who recognize the source. Prayer also activates favor through clarity. Many people miss favor because they overlook it, misinterpret it, or mishandle it. Morning prayer sharpens vision so you recognize opportunities disguised as responsibility, growth disguised as challenge, and protection disguised as delay. Favor does not always look like ease, sometimes it looks like preparation. Prayer helps you discern when God is stretching you rather than opposing you. That discernment allows you to respond with faith instead of frustration. Alignment through prayer also influences relationships. When you pray in the morning, God aligns you with the right people and distances you from the wrong ones without unnecessary conflict. Conversations become purposeful, connections become meaningful. You begin to notice who brings peace, who brings clarity, and who brings confusion. Favor shows up in relationships that multiply strength rather than drain it. Prayer makes you sensitive enough to steward relationships wisely. Morning prayer aligns your words. What you speak throughout the day carries power. Prayer disciplines your speech before circumstances test it. You are less reactive, less defensive, and more intentional. Words spoken from alignment carry authority. Favor follows words that agree with God's perspective rather than fear-driven narratives. Prayer trains your tongue to bless rather than curse the day ahead. Alignment also brings order to decisions. Many decisions are not wrong, they are simply out of alignment. Prayer invites God into decision-making before pressure arrives. When choices come suddenly, you respond from a place of preparedness rather than panic. Favor operates where decisions reflect wisdom rather than impulse. Morning prayer establishes decision-making frameworks rooted in faith. Prayer activates favor by building spiritual momentum. What you release early shapes what follows later. Just as a compass sets direction before movement begins, prayer sets spiritual direction before activity begins. The day may still bring resistance, but resistance feels different when momentum is established. You are not constantly restarting emotionally or spiritually. You move forward with continuity. Favor flows more easily when momentum is sustained. Morning prayer also aligns your expectations. Expectations influence experience. When you expect struggle, you magnify it. When you expect God's involvement, you notice His hand. Prayer resets expectation away from fear and toward trust. Favor thrives in an atmosphere of expectation. Expectation does not demand outcomes, it anticipates partnership. Prayer shifts expectation from control to confidence. Alignment through prayer affects endurance. Some days require persistence rather than instant victory. Prayer prepares you to last. Favor is not always immediate relief. Sometimes it is the strength to remain steady until the appointed time. Morning prayer fortifies patience so you do not abandon alignment prematurely. Many blessings are missed not because God withheld them, but because alignment was abandoned too soon. Prayer also aligns you with purpose. Activity does not equal productivity. Many people stay busy but remain unfulfilled because purpose was never consulted. Morning prayer invites God to filter tasks. You begin to recognize what matters and what merely fills time. Favor rests on purpose, not busyness. Alignment ensures your energy is invested wisely. Morning prayer activates favor by creating spiritual authority. Authority is not volume, it is alignment with truth. When you pray, you operate under divine covering. That covering does not remove challenges, but governs them. Favor expresses itself through protection, wisdom, and resilience. Prayer establishes boundaries in the unseen that affect what manifests in the seen. Alignment also releases peace. Peace is a sign of correct alignment. When you pray in the morning, peace settles before chaos attempts to rise. Favor often looks like peace in the middle of pressure. Prayer does not deny reality, it anchors you within it. Peace allows you to think clearly, respond wisely, and trust deeply. Prayer activates favor because it opens spiritual access. What remains inaccessible without prayer becomes reachable through it. Prayer aligns you with divine resources, insights, and interventions that cannot be obtained through effort alone. Favor flows through access. Morning prayer unlocks access before the day demands answers. Alignment through prayer also cultivates gratitude. Gratitude attracts favor because it recognizes grace already present. Morning prayer shifts focus from what is missing to what has been given. That posture multiplies awareness of blessing. Favor increases where gratitude flows freely. Prayer does not change God's willingness, it changes your readiness. Morning prayer positions you to receive what has already been prepared. Alignment makes reception possible. Favor moves toward readiness, not neediness. When you pray, you are not convincing God to act. You are aligning yourself to receive what He has already released, positioning your heart, your mind, your steps, and your expectations to move in harmony with divine order, allowing the unseen adjustments to shape visible outcomes, trusting that alignment established early carries influence throughout the day, influencing responses, decisions, encounters, and opportunities as they unfold in ways that reflect divine intention rather than human striving. Continuing to move forward from a place of agreement rather than resistance, awareness rather than confusion, confidence rather than anxiety, as the activation of alignment and favor continues to operate quietly beneath every moment that follows. When God goes before you, opposition cannot overtake you because resistance is never faster than divine purpose. Opposition may appear, but it does not arrive first. It reacts. It does not initiate. God's movement always precedes the movement of resistance, which means whatever rises against you is responding to what has already been set in motion. The enemy does not create plans for your life. It reacts to the plans already authored by God. This changes how you interpret obstacles because they are not signs of delay, they are signs of progress. Opposition loses its advantage when it is not first. Surprise is one of its primary weapons, and when God goes before you, surprise is removed. Nothing catches him off guard. What shocks you does not shock him. What feels sudden to you was already seen, measured, and accounted for. Opposition depends on intimidation, but intimidation only works when you believe the obstacle has the upper hand. Knowing God went before you reframes the moment. You are not surrounded, the resistance is. When God goes before you, opposition is forced to confront divine order. It cannot rearrange what God has already established. It may attempt to slow you, distract you, or pressure you into compromise, but it cannot reverse divine intent. Opposition thrives in chaos, but preparation creates structure. God's order limits how far resistance can go and how long it can remain effective. Even when opposition is loud, it is still governed. Opposition often overestimates its power because it only sees the present moment. God sees the full timeline. What seems overwhelming now may already be weakening. What appears strong may already be losing influence. Opposition does not know the end of the story, but God does. When God goes before you, the outcome is already decided, even if the process is still unfolding. This allows you to remain steady while opposition exhausts itself. Resistance is also exposed when God goes before you. Hidden agendas surface. Misaligned motives reveal themselves. What was operating quietly begins to lose cover. Opposition depends on concealment, but divine presence brings clarity. When God goes before you, truth moves ahead of you as well. Lies unravel. Confusion dissipates. The fog lifts. You may not immediately see everything clearly, but enough light appears to prevent missteps. Opposition cannot overtake what it cannot outpace. God's timing is not hurried, but it is precise. Resistance often relies on urgency to force poor decisions. When God goes before you, you are not rushed into reaction. You are guided into response. That distinction matters. Reaction is driven by fear. Response is guided by wisdom. Opposition loses momentum when you refuse to move faster than God's instruction. When God goes before you, opposition is forced to operate outside of its preferred environment. It thrives in fear, doubt, and isolation. God's presence establishes faith, assurance, and connection. Resistance weakens when it cannot find agreement within you. It searches for access through discouragement but encounters trust. It looks for cracks through anxiety but finds peace. Opposition needs internal permission to succeed, and God going before you fortifies the internal landscape. Opposition also becomes instructional when God goes before you. Instead of destroying you, it sharpens discernment. Instead of stopping you, it strengthens resolve. What was meant to derail you becomes a lesson in authority. You begin to recognize patterns, identify warning signs, and trust intuition shaped by prayer. Opposition loses its ability to repeat itself because you no longer approach situations unaware. When God goes before you, opposition is restricted by boundaries you did not set. There are limits placed on what can touch you, how deeply it can affect you, and how long it can remain. Resistance may knock, but it cannot enter without permission. It may challenge, but it cannot consume. God's presence acts as a filter, allowing growth while blocking destruction. What passes through is transformed. Opposition often attempts to redefine your identity. It speaks to who you are rather than what you face. When God goes before you, identity is already secured. You do not need to prove yourself to pressure. You do not need to perform for validation. You stand from a place of knowing rather than striving. Resistance loses influence when identity is anchored. When God goes before you, opposition is outmatched in strategy. Resistance is reactive and predictable. Divine wisdom is creative and adaptive. God creates paths where none appear. He opens alternatives you did not consider. Opposition blocks one route and God reveals another. What seemed like a dead end becomes a redirection. Resistance cannot anticipate divine innovation. Opposition also cannot overtake purpose when God goes before you. Purpose carries momentum that resistance cannot stop. You may be slowed, but you are not stalled. Detours do not cancel destiny, they refine it. God uses resistance to develop endurance, humility, and wisdom. What opposition intended to weaken becomes the very thing that prepares you for what is next. When God goes before you, opposition is never personal, even when it feels intimate. Resistance targets assignment, not worth. Understanding this prevents emotional exhaustion. You stop internalizing battles that were never about you. This clarity protects joy. Opposition wants you distracted by offense, but God keeps you focused on direction. Opposition also cannot outlast divine patience. Resistance burns energy quickly. God is eternal. Waiting favors God, not the obstacle. Time exposes what is sustainable and what is temporary. When God goes before you, patience becomes a weapon. You are not anxious for immediate resolution because you trust eventual victory. Opposition weakens as you remain unmoved. When God goes before you, opposition is never allowed to have the final word. It may speak loudly, but it does not speak last. God's declarations override temporary narratives. Fear speaks, but faith responds. Doubt suggests retreat, but truth invites persistence. Resistance may create noise, but divine authority establishes outcome. Opposition also loses power when you stop interpreting it as failure. Resistance does not mean you missed God. Often it means you followed him. Pressure is not proof of error. Sometimes it is confirmation of alignment. When God goes before you, opposition becomes a signpost rather than a stop sign. When God goes before you, opposition cannot overtake you because you are not moving alone. You are accompanied by wisdom beyond your own, strength beyond your capacity, and insight beyond your experience. Resistance may attempt to surround, but it cannot isolate. You are carried, guided, and sustained even when you feel stretched. Opposition also cannot steal what God secures ahead of time. What is meant for you is guarded before you arrive. Favor waits for you. Provision meets you. Support rises when needed. Resistance may try to intercept, but it arrives too late. God's preparation has already claimed the space. When God goes before you, opposition becomes limited to observation rather than control. It watches progress it cannot stop. It witnesses growth it cannot reverse. It sees doors open it cannot close. This does not mean the journey is effortless, but it means the destination is not in question. Opposition may challenge the process, but it cannot cancel the promise. When God goes before you, you learn to move without panic. You stop measuring success by speed and start measuring it by faithfulness. Resistance loses its ability to rush you into decisions that compromise alignment. You trust that what is delayed is not denied, and what is contested is already claimed. Opposition often relies on repetition, hoping fatigue will produce surrender. When God goes before you, strength is renewed rather than depleted. You learn to rest without retreating. You learn to pause without quitting. Resistance weakens when persistence remains calm. When God goes before you, opposition cannot overtake you because it never reaches the place of authority. Authority is established ahead of movement. God governs what you encounter before you encounter it. Even when resistance appears close, it is still operating under permission it did not grant itself. Opposition may follow, but it does not lead. Fear may whisper, but it does not decide. Pressure may increase, but it does not prevail. God's presence ahead of you determines the pace, the outcome, and the authority under which every challenge must operate, ensuring that what rises against you is always responding to a victory already set in place, unfolding within a framework of divine order, timing, and purpose that continues to move forward regardless of resistance, disruption, or delay, reinforcing that being opposed does not mean being overtaken, and encountering resistance does not mean losing ground. As long as the one who goes before you continues to define the path you are walking on and the direction in which you are moving forward without yielding ground to what was never meant to lead you or determine the outcome of what has already been established ahead of you,